Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We're going to talk about Legends of Vox Machina, Amazon Prime. Spoilers for for Legends of Vox Machina, Amazon Prime in this content. And we're going to talk about what comes next. We're going to talk about Friday, Netflix, and WOTC, and Matthew Mercer's relationship with WOTC. All right, so let's get into this. All right, so Legends of Vox Machina. This is the weekend, we just had the Legends of Vox Machina weekend, right? And everybody and anybody who gives two figs about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition watched the heck out of this thing, because they knew nothing in the world right now is more helpful to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition than this succeeding right now on Amazon Prime. Like, this was go time for the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition community, right? If you love Dungeons & Dragons 5e, there was nothing you could do this weekend that was more powerful than simply watch, right? I did it, and it sounds like almost all of you did it too. At least gave it a try. Thank you. Really appreciate that. It is truly incredible to me what Mercer has accomplished about putting himself in the middle of the conversation for everyone, right? So basically, Matthew Mercer, if you care about D&D, it's really incredible. If you care about Dungeons & Dragons 5e, you want Mercer to succeed, because no one in the world has done more to attract brand new, fresh players to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition than Matthew Mercer. Nobody on the planet, right? And frankly, it's quite possible the 10 people behind him combined haven't done as much, right? Like, I hear people talk about, like, the Adventure Group. Like, I don't even know what the second most, the Adventure Group, I think, is like the second most known streamer group, and like they're not even remotely close, right? So and then the other thing that's really fascinating is I've seen a ton of people that absolutely detest the style of Dungeons & Dragons that Mercer puts forward in Critical Role, who want Mercer to become the champion of Dungeons & Dragons, of falling Dungeons & Dragons, of slaying the dragon of Dungeons & Dragons, and finally putting some other tabletop role-playing game on as Queen of the Hill, right? And so it's incredible that Matthew Mercer has become this proxy champion for the D&D 5e community, has become a proxy champion for people who want to see the D&D 5e community fall, right? Like, how could you, and Mercer just puts himself in the middle of it all, because in my opinion, what he truly is, the best way to understand Matthew Mercer is Michael Jordan, right? If Michael Jordan had, actually, he's exactly like Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan distracted himself with baseball, right? And I honestly think Mercer's biggest distraction is Hollywood. I think he wants to be, a real Hollywood actor, or just doesn't want to move away from the voice acting stuff, which is very much really keeping him from major accomplishments in the tabletop role-playing game community, including surpassing Gygax. I think Mercer's the only one on the planet who has even a possibility of doing it, right? All right, so let's talk about Friday. So what happens next? So this coming Friday, we get a new episode, okay? Now, all this is going to do, I think, is the people who are in, this is going to say something. It's going to be like, this is a real show, right? This is Dungeons & Dragons with a real new animated show. And the last time that happened was in 1986, right? 1983 to 1986, there was three years of a Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. And guess what? Those two cartoons were shockingly similar. So one of them was a Saturday morning cartoon, right? The idea that it was theoretical that it was for kids. One thing that really blows my mind is Gary Gygax, started in 1974. 9 years later, Mad, Mothers Against Dungeons & Dragons is coming out. People are like, hey, we don't think that kids can tell the reality from fantasy, and we have a lot of concerns about your game. Gary Gygax's response was like, I hear you. I'm going to Hollywood right now. I'm making a show in which children from Earth get trapped in the fantasy world from the IRL and can't make it out, right? So your big concern as parents, I'm going to put it into the show. and say, what if your kids were trapped in a fantasy world and really couldn't access the IRL because they were just too anchored to the fantasy world they were trapped in, captured in? Gary Gygax was such like an outrageous disruptor. Like, big tech leads, like, they're like, I'm a disruptor. Are you? Like, Gary Gygax in 1974 was outrageously disruptive, right? Like, and tech is the same way. They're like, we want to disrupt things, so we want to break them and make new things. And that's exactly what Gary Gygax did in 1974. So the idea that the 1983 cartoon is that different than the 2022 Vox Machina, they ain't that much different. They're both quite, well, actually, believe it or not, Vox Machina's, crude humor, it's not even that disruptive. Like, it's arguable that the 1983 show had more scary, disrupting things in it than the 2022 show, right? But here we are, right? 1983 to 1986. Now, 2022 to X. What is it? Is it going to be 2025? Can it do 3 seasons, right? And if it does, what does that mean? So the biggest thing is we have a real Dungeons & Dragons show literally airing right now, right? And that's a big deal. And so we are all going to process that, right? And we're going to say, oh, did it get better? Is it adding to the story? Blah, 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 right? But that's real. We're in it, right? Like, we haven't been here since 1986, right? But we're here now, and it's exciting. Okay. Next is Netflix. Netflix is the boogeyman in the room now. Why? Okay. Because Amazon Prime already had a very good, incredibly quality animation show that they put on their service, and nobody cared until it went to Netflix. Here was the flow. Avatar: Last Airbender was on Amazon Prime for like 3 or 4 years, right? It started on Nickelodeon, went to Amazon Prime, streamed there for 3 or 4 years. Maybe 5 to 10% of America watched it. Nobody cared, right? Like, at the macro level, nobody cared. Then they put Avatar on Netflix, and it was like the whole world in one fell swoop just discovered the Avatar: Last Airbender. It was, and like half the country watched it. It was in a month, right? Because there's like 3-4 seasons, right? And so here's the other thing is, even if Vox Machina doesn't blow up on Amazon, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has a new chance for new juice, new joy, new momentum from Matthew Mercer's accomplishments, right, when it gets to Netflix, right? So if you keep moving and you keep producing, and that's exactly what Mercer has done. He has continued to produce new content on Twitter and on the web, and with the Tal'Dorei book, and with the Darrington Press Tal'Dorei, don't matter one lick, right? Nobody cares at the macro level. Only people who care are critters, right? But the reality, what people do care about? Explorer's Guide to Wildemount and Call to Netherdeep, right? Those are the real deal Critical Role, like the ones that matter, right? Those are the settings that actually are official Dungeons & Dragons. Vox Machina is Dungeons & Dragons to the core, right? Like, it Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Because I think everybody knows. Oh, yeah. So basically, even if this doesn't do as well as we would like on Amazon, there's still a chance it can blow up when it hits Netflix, right? All good for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Now, let's talk about Mercer versus Wizards of the Coast, turning to Mercer and Wizards of the Coast, possibly. This is very interesting. Okay, here we go. Matthew Mercer has, he really has a tiger by the tail, and everybody's asking this question. They're like, hey, do people play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition because Mercer got them excited about it, right? Is that the real juice? Mercer's the real juice, right? And Mercer can just move that excitement over to a new game. Or, right, is it Mercer succeeded because he was smart enough the moment he knew he actually had to put something on screen and produce real numbers to dump Pathfinder because it's not Dungeons & Dragons, right? And move to the best game in the world that will get people viewing, right? Because it's the only tabletop role-playing game in the world that can bring millions, right? And the real juice is Mercer succeeded because it's Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. That is the big question. That's what everybody wants to know. That is the question of the day, right? And right now, this is new. Like, I honestly think that Vox Machina will do well because it has street cred because it's attached to Dungeons and Dragons. Good example is Dota. Dota is a very good animated show, exactly like Vox Machina on Netflix, and nobody cares. Nobody cares because it doesn't have a real stamp of authenticity, right? So there's going to be a lot of thought and a lot of movement on both sides, right? Like, they're going to be, Mercer and WOTC are going to be looking at each other like, hey, do we make a real alliance and get this thing done and get it locked down, right? There's going to be a lot of tension in the room, and that conversation is going to be processed with the success or failure of Vox Machina. That's what I think is coming next. What do you think is coming next? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.